What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad Podcast. Today, I am super excited to chat with Brent Perkins. Really looking forward to getting into his story, chatting about what he's got going on. I just learned that he's one of the board members of Front Row Dads, which is awesome. So that should make this even better. Really looking forward to kind of digging into this. But Brent, if you can, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about your family, and then tell us about your business.
Yeah, like you said, it's where I sit today is spending a lot of time doing this work around showing up as a human and as a dad. And I've been part of Front Row Dads, which is this amazing community of entrepreneurial men who put their families first for the last little over 3 years. I've got two daughters, 17 and 20-year-olds. One's a D1 swimmer, which has been really a fun journey for her. And the other one is on her way as a 6 foot 1 inch basketball player. So we'll see where she lands here in the next year, coming out of high school. I have a partner for the last couple of years who has twin 9-year-olds. So there's really 4 kiddos in my life. I was married for 18 years and that ended about three and a half years ago. So in terms of business, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've chased the business dream. I've gotten to a point where I sat in the CEO role of some 7 and 8 figure businesses for about 11 years. And I backed out of all of that about 3 years ago and took a whole different direction in life. I got a weird calling to write a book, which didn't know I had in me, didn't know I could write. And from there, it's led to my own development of other men who are leaders. And really, my business, which is 3X Bold, is around teaching men, entrepreneurial men, to become a father, a lover, and a leader, and how to do all 3 of those.
Welcome to the BizDad Podcast, where we dive into the melding of fathership and entrepreneurship with your host, the original BizDad himself, Adam Labar. Adam is a Christian, a former Air Force officer, a dad to 3 amazing kids, a coach, a real estate investor, and a business owner. On this podcast, he'll explore the unique journeys of amazing dads who are striving for greatness in both business and family. So whether you're a dad who is an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a man striving to be a better dad, get ready as the BizDad brings you conversations to inspire, challenge, and equip you to be a better dad and entrepreneur. And now, here's Adam.
That's right in line with where I'm at. And I will say I noticed time-wise, 3 years ago, you left kind of the corporate world, and 3.5 years ago, you ended up at a divorce. I would imagine one had something to do with the other. Are you willing to opine a little bit on that and tell me any connection there?
I think so many things were just converging and coming to a head in my life. My ex-wife and I weren't happy for a while, and trying to play that game, which is like, oh, let's stay together for the kids. It's healthier for them. And interesting that, 1, I don't believe that anymore, but 2, if I can hit pause on this for a second and just drill into this, which is, I talk to a lot of other men, especially with Front Row Dads, that community, who are doing the same thing. They're like, hey, it's good enough. My marriage is fine. Probably not going to last after the kids are gone. We're just going to make it work. And what I saw with my own kids is that we send them off into the world, right? And the one thing they do, even beyond business, which is kind of where I think a lot of us dads try to focus, what are you going to do? How can we get you ready for that? But what about relationships? What about that person they're going to be with potentially for the rest of their life? Like we don't often prepare them through modeling to get into the longest term, most personal, most intimate factor of their life. And I didn't model that at all for 18 years. And looking back, it's like, well, shoot, I gave them some skills, in other areas, but I didn't model that at all. So it's been an interesting reflection point to say, lessons are caught, not taught. And I just had a different mindset around how I was showing up in my marriage.
Yeah, I often talk about how things are caught, not taught, and our kids will walk around at one point or another in their life with a little mirror around their neck and they're going to turn around and do something, and you're going to see yourself in what they did, and you're going to go, oh crap, or you're going to go, oh yes, like I did something right. So which one would you rather it be? Would you rather be, oh crap, that was me, or would you rather be, yes, I did something right, that was me? And it's not an easy place to be in. I think we're going to see both of those in our kids, no matter what. Like it's like that old, I don't want to screw up my kids. Well, you are, just how bad, and in what way. So I think it's bound to happen. But you mentioned trying to model that, and it leads into my curiosity on your background. What sort of modeling did you kind of see from your dad as you were growing up? Like what sort of, tell me about your relationship with your dad, who your dad was. Obviously both parents, but this is a dad podcast, so let me kind of get into the dad a little bit, and what was modeled there for you growing up.
A lot of business. My dad was an entrepreneur. He stepped into a few different businesses, built one from zero to, I think when he left it was $37 million. Ended up getting pushed out towards the end. He was one of the 3 or 4 owners of that company, and did all right, but it also led to his own divorce. So his journey getting there included my brother and I, and it was really, really special to get to work at his office and do a lot of the grunt work, from shipping to cleaning to doing all the things you don't want to do to work your way up in an organization. And I also saw him go to work at 5 a.m. and come home at 6 p.m. and take a couple hour lunches where he was drinking beer, and go on a lot of business trips and be gone probably 100 days a year. So it was a weird combination of a lot of pride and a lot of lessons learned in a positive way from business, and at the same time the modeling of the exact opposite way of how to show up at home in your family. And it ultimately spelled the demise of him and my mom's relationship. I didn't understand it at the time, but he was kind of.
How old were you when that happened?
They didn't call it quits until I was 22, right after college. Yeah.
So it goes back to what you were talking about before, like, oh, we'll make it until the kids are gone, and then the kids are gone, and it just.
That's what they did.
So did you not? Do you recall much like interaction between your mom and your dad, like on an intimate or friendly or flirtatious level or anything like that, or was it more? Do you remember any of that between them?
No, not much.
Yeah.
We did stuff as families, but it was almost like roommates. Like we were just all there.
And that's painful. And it's one of those things, I think. And if. Again, it goes back to the modeling thing, right? Like my goal is to, and I've said this probably 100 times on the podcast, but is to raise better men than me. And now that I have a daughter, my goal is to raise a woman who can find a better man than me. So like the only way to be able to do that is to model it, right? And so I am doing everything I can on a daily basis to model what it means to be a wonderful, engaging husband at the same time as a wonderful and engaging dad. Fail miserably at it rather often, but I'm always curious to kind of understand the relationship side of the house on what, how we can spot when those things are starting to go awry. So in your scenario where you saw it as a kid and then didn't actually see the divorce until you were an adult, but then had to experience that yourself later on in life, what would you say are some of the parallels that you saw with your parents as maybe you and your ex-wife, or some things that you had you caught on to what was going on in your parents, maybe it would have helped change what was going on in your relationship?
Yeah, I think one of the big things I had to learn later on that I saw with my parents and 100% with me was that my ex-wife and I both went into our marriage with certain expectations, certain understandings, certain maybe even fascinations and ideas that weren't necessarily true for both of us. Maybe they were projections. And what we didn't do is make agreements. And this is a big thing I talk about, not only in my own leadership development work, but with a lot of the men I work with, whether in business or at home, which is shifting all the expectations we have. We walk into countless situations, whether it's you walk into Starbucks and you're going to order coffee and you have expectations. What does it smell like? How are they going to talk to me? Did they write my name down right? Or did they miss a letter? To your kids, they walk in, they missed a dish, or they didn't pick up a sock, or something happened. Like we have expectations everywhere versus having agreements. And that right there, for me, is the root to, so we can expand on this. We can stack the layers of the onion on top of it. And I can tell you my own stories around it, but that's the root to it. I didn't get with my ex-wife in the beginning and say, hey, we obviously like each other. We're having fun. What does this look like going forward? What do you want in life? What do I want? How do we, an agreement gives both sides a chance to negotiate. Expectations don't.
Especially when the expectations are stuck in your head and they've never been verbalized, right? So like if I'm expecting, I don't think there's anything wrong with expecting dinner to be made when I get home from work. But I think there's something wrong with expecting dinner to be made when I get home from work without ever having said that, without ever having understood where that person's coming from, without ever anything. So again, I think it does go to the agreement side. Like we have a discussion like, hey, I'm going to come home from work a little bit late. I would really appreciate it if I could have some food on the day. I understand you're home with the kids or maybe not, right? I'm just making up a story. My wife is at work right now, so I'm not trying to, make this into a chauvinistic whatever, but it goes back to the, having the conversation. What are the agreements we have, with each other, and how do we, where can our expectations turn into agreements and where can they not, the conversations before you got married, what sort of conversations about what marriage is going to look like did you guys have, you and your wife, or if any?
None. We were having fun. We were out partying. We were, enjoying each other. We got pregnant. It was like, we can do this. I think we love each other, whatever love really is and means.
I don't know if you listen to Patrick Bet-David at all, but I love listening to his podcast. And one of the things he talked about was when, he was with a lot of girls and a lot of doing all sorts of stuff. And then he realized, boy, I need to change this. I need a wife. And he got this book that was like, I forgot what it's called. I'm going to butcher it, but basically like 100 questions to ask your future wife or your future spouse, where you sit down. And he said, like on his first date with his current wife, he sat down with that book and went over all of these questions and said, no, I'm not looking to go have a fling. I am looking for a wife. I'm looking for somebody to spend the rest of my life with. And it was like, let's have these intentional conversations about who you are, about who I am. And if we don't line up, no big deal. We can move on. I've always thought that was, I've looked at it from a different angle because I look at it as a Christian guy. Like I try to explain to my kids and other Christian men, like the purpose of dating is to find a wife. So if you're dating somebody and you don't think you're going to be with that person long term, then just cut it now and be done. Why go through all the effort of I'm just having this fun. Like, what are you missing out on in the meantime of the actual goal of finding a wife? And so I think that sitting down and asking those questions up front, it was super eye opening to me when I heard him talk about that. So if you were to go back, especially going through the experience you had, what questions would you ask before you got married to help you kind of make sure that you had the right agreements in place, that you guys were aligned going forward, especially because, you said at a young age you were already CEO, so you already have business in your brain going on before all this goes on. So that's obviously got to be a discussion on what that means on the relationship. So I'm going to just throw it over to you and kind of get an idea what kind of questions would you ask before getting married, especially as an entrepreneur, a business owner going into this?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer your question, and I'm going to be slightly contrarian because one of the things I've learned in life is that goals usually bite me in the butt, especially when I'm chasing them. And part of where I've shifted my experience, because I grew up very, very religious in the Christian church. I was indoctrinated into, the full gamut of Christian school, church every single Wednesday and Sunday, mission trips, doing all the things. And what I find, and why I don't know if I fully agree with you, what you said about not pursuing something that may not be like that wife, because all we have in life, I'm finding in my journey, are experiences. And that's how we learn. Like, we're designed to fail. And I think we've ruined that word as a society and made it really bad when it's beautiful. Like, you're supposed to skin your knees. You're supposed to not get it right. You're supposed to have an interplay of relationship dynamics with people. Like you and me talking right now, we didn't know each other before coming on here, and we're learning as we go through this, and I fully understand my perspective. It's not universal truth. It can shift over time. And I'm really curious to find out other people's interpretations of their own experiences. So I try not to step out of too many of these potential experiences because there's so much to learn. And the more I learn and the more what learning does is it's actually unlearning. Like it helps me shed all of these ideas and preconceived notions I have about myself. When I do actually find what I'm looking for, like for instance, if I right now was looking for another wife, the more I interacted with people and learned what I didn't like or want, it actually sharpens what I am looking for.
No, I think I actually agree completely with that. I'm going to fire something back just because I think it's going to be fun. So let's say, those experiences, right? And this is not meant to be like a cantankerous situation, just enjoying the back and forth. I think that finding out whether or not robbing a bank would be a blast, right? Let me go find out if robbing a bank is fun, right? That'd be a great experience. I'll learn a lot from it. I'll figure out whether or not I have the wherewithal to avoid the FBI later on and, see if they got the money out of it. And probably not the best choice, right? So I could probably figure out before I go do that that's not a great idea. And I think that's where I'm trying to come from on the marriage side of the house is, okay, if I'm realizing already right now that this is not a person that I'm going to be able to robbing this bank is probably not the best. Like marrying this lady, while fun, I'm going to have a great time. Like now, like go out and have parties and do all this stuff. Long term, probably not the best for me. That's where I think I say that it's like a making sure that, hey, once you realize that this isn't where you should be going, it's time to move on. And that experience did teach you something because you learned what you didn't like or what you didn't think was going to be a long-term relationship. So I love the contrarian pipe. So please, and that's why I want to throw it back and kind of get your thoughts there.
No, I totally understand where your brain's going, and you're not wrong.
I'm going to pause right there. We're going to end the podcast at that. I'm not wrong. We're going to go.
Where it gets nuanced for me, and this is something I'm only learning in the last few years, right? This is new stuff for me in my own journey. But it's that as I sit in some of these experiences, I can get to a point, I have gotten to a point where it's like, ooh, I hit my boundary line. This doesn't feel good. There's a lot of friction. Friction's different than tension for me. Tension, things stretch. Sometimes you got to create tension for them to slingshot forward, right? Friction means there's sandpaper. It's going to turn bloody. It hurts. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And I found it's incredibly rewarding and insightful to stop and go, okay, this feels not good. I can hit the eject button, or I can be aware that I'm at the edge of my boundary and start asking some questions, which is, what am I supposed to be learning right now? What would this look like if I was here 10 years ago? What if I shared exactly how I'm feeling with whoever I'm dealing with this with and try to create a space where I'm not judging them? And can I do it in a safe way where they get to say, oh, I don't like being here either. I'm so glad you said something. Or maybe they say, yeah, you're not for me. And getting to this place of curiosity in this really open way to explore where things are not exactly as they seem, because good Lord, they never are.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth. Yeah. So I think that I actually love that. And I think that actually is more in line with my thought process than I would have thought we would have ended up on that, because it's one of those that it involves conversation, right? And it takes both of you guys, it takes the two to tango, right? Is this truly friction where it's painful and we're going in the wrong directions? The only way to find that out is to have the conversation, not just, if I choose to run away, maybe it was just tension and we were going in the same direction. We just had a different idea of how we were moving there. So it felt like it was bad.
I'm going to give you a real life perfect example.
Yeah.
A lady I've been dating for the last 2 years, who I would definitely consider at this point, a life partner. I was sober for 1.5 years before we started dating. It was something I needed to do when I, had the shift from stepping out of my business career, from stepping out of my marriage. I needed clarity. I needed to just clean things up and hit reset. And she's not a big drinker, but she likes to drink, and her beverage of choice is a good margarita, right? And it was maybe 3 months after we started dating, I imbibed. I joined in. And part of me, about a year in, and where I let it creep back in my life quite a bit was like, what am I doing? And I knew she had no intention of stopping, but she also didn't struggle with it at times the way I struggled with it in my life. And instead of getting frustrated or mad or like hitting the eject button, I just had honest conversations. And she's like, I get it, I support you, but I'm not, I'm doing me, you do you, which still was really difficult at times. And you know what happened? 3 months later, she stopped drinking. And then I hadn't. And she said, why don't you stop with me? So it's so interesting to play with these situations in our lives instead of judging them all or saying, I can't be here, this isn't me. And really what I've found in all of my teaching, parenting, leadership development work is I actually have nothing to offer other people except for to share my journey, myself, my experiences with so much vulnerability that it gives them permission to actually start exploring their own. And I've seen that time and time again. It's really beautiful.
So do you have any what I'll call closed-handed issues, right? So I have open-handed issues and closed-handed issues. A closed-handed issue is something that it's not going to matter. That is a make or break thing. If you're not in line with me on this, then this is not going to work. Open-hand is, hey, I don't mind, like the drinking thing, right? That seems to be an open-handed thing. Like it's okay. Like if you drink, that's fine. I drink, not like no big deal. We're fine with it. Do you have any closed-handed issues, or like these are the types of things that are absolutely no-goes for me? That you would, especially, I'll say that you would pass on to your daughters, like to say, hey, these are things that you shouldn't budge on.
Yeah. Yes. It's probably only one big thing, honestly, and it's something I was not great at in my life. The thing that shifted for me was getting in full integrity over the last 3 years, and it started with reading Martha Beck's book, The Way of Integrity, where she really modeled this, like cutting out even white lies and really going deep about where we smooth out the edges of all the stories we tell, and we lock them away, and you bring them back out, and the edges got shaved off even further, and you put them away again, you bring them back out. It's like, this thing's like 60 to 70% of what it used to be, and that's how you remember it as full truth. And getting into full integrity, not sugarcoating things, not glossing it over, not pretending they don't exist is so important for me in my life. And it's an agreement I make with people too, especially with those that I choose to partner with, whether it's an intimate partner, in that sort of relationship, or my kids. And outside of that, there's not a whole lot, because we could give example after example of things like the bank robber example, or something with my parents or your parents. And at the end of the day, I've kicked out, and I don't have regret in my life anymore. I wouldn't change the fact that I used to drink too much, or I didn't have integrity, or I did this, or I did that, because if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be me right now. I wouldn't be serving my family, my community in the way I do if I hadn't gone through it. So do I regret it? No. Do I choose to go back into it? Yeah, no, I don't, not anymore. But I'm actually really, really appreciative that I learned it, that somebody didn't shield it from me. It's part of the reason as dads we're like, I don't want my kids to go through that. Why? You wouldn't be who you are if you didn't go through it. Mm-hmm. You can't prevent somebody from experiencing something and then have them just all of a sudden understand it. That's not how humans work. We have to experience things. Can we create a sandbox that's safe? Yes. Yeah, right? Can we put like bumpers around it so that it's like, it's easier to fail faster? Yes. Mm-hmm. Can we prevent it? Not if you don't want them to have to experience it in their own way.
Yeah.
At some point.
And I tell my kids often, like, fail, but fail forward. Fail often, fail forward, because it's not they need to experience what failure feels like. They need to experience what life is like. But I love the true integrity in your whole life aspect. It's one of those, like Jordan Peterson, one of his rules and his 12 rules for life or whatever it was tell the truth, or at least don't lie, right? Like it's something's always going to come back to you, right? Like sometimes if you can't tell the truth, at least shut your mouth, right? Just don't say anything. At least don't lie about it, right? And it's one of those that I've taken such to the point where, or at least I attempt to take especially the point where like my kids, I said, I'm never going to tell them that Santa Claus is real. Like I can't get myself to tell my kids that Santa Claus is real, because it's one of those, like, I don't need them to understand that at the very beginning of their life, one of the first things I did was tell them this massive lie that they believed for 6 years of their life, 7 years of their life, 10 years of their life, however long it is. And then all of a sudden it ripped out of them. And I was like, oh, I can't have that, you know? Part of me fears that, that's some sort of way for me to tout my integrity. And I'm like, man, I want to keep myself in check and go, no, like, I am fully capable of telling massive lies and screwing people over on a massive level. So it's always a good reminder to say, you know what, like, no, like this is something I can't budge on, and I've got to stick to that. And I think that's a phenomenal thing to pass to the kids.
You know, it's interesting, just to maybe put a little capper on this topic or toss it back to you for a second. I hear the Santa thing. It's come up a few times, and sharing our emotions, sharing our experience. Like I don't believe we're our brain. I don't believe we're our body. I believe we're this infinite soul that happens to be on this journey, occupying this body. And we are here as, every square inch of your body is an input device. It has sensations, feelings, smells, sounds, tastes. It is here to experience the world, and your brain just sits on top. It's the data processor. It tells you what that experience is. And too often, especially men, we think we're our brain. And we put so much pride in, we think it's just amazing how much money it's made us and where it's taken us in life. And yet our brain is secondary to our body, and our body is secondary to our soul and who we are on a more infinite, spiritual level. But as we have these emotions and feelings that are tied to this experience of being a human in life, that's where I find it's the easiest and the hardest to tell the truth. I mean, easiest to tell a lie and hardest to tell the truth, because Santa's one thing. It's like, okay, Santa's not real. That's a fake thing. But if you were to tell me, if we were honest, like if I said, hey, how are you feeling right now? Would you be able to easily say, I'm feeling really good, but honestly, like what you're saying right now is rubbing me a little bit wrong, and that's not about you, so I don't even have to explain it. But I don't know why. I hear you. I actually am enjoying the conversation, but I got something going on where it doesn't feel great. Who talks like that, right? Like, we rarely go to those depths, but that is where we connect with humans and our kids. That level of honesty.
So you said you kind of started feeling that over the last few years of really kind of flowing that through. So like, let me rewind a little bit and go back to, you operating businesses, being a CEO, kind of building all that stuff out while having kids and a wife. And how did you kind of view life at that point? How were you kind of going through the business world? Like, you had already experienced, even as a kid, working inside your dad's company. And now here you are running companies. Like, how did that interaction with your kids go? How did you converse with them at those times, and about what you were doing, about what was going on, and, all of that?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I wasn't around a lot, One of the jobs I was in, CEO from 2011 to 2017, I traveled to 37 countries and spoke at hospitals and Olympic training centers and sports arenas around the world. And I was gone over 100 days a year. And who I was on the stage of life, right, was way more important than being present with my kids. And even when I was there, I didn't really want to be there. And I was physically there, but I wasn't present. So
when did you kind of realize that, I'll use detriment as the word, the detriment that was causing to your kids, when you not even being present? When did that kind of start to click in your head?
There was no singular moment. Having kids in this age range that are in the anxious generation, and dealing with all they've gone through with anxiety and depression and ADHD, that's kind of lumped onto them, whether or not any that's actually real or whether it's created from, the situation we're in currently in life with our social media and all the things. It just crept up to a point where they were struggling, just like a lot of kids. And I didn't, it wasn't until things got, challenging with school with them, and challenging just to wake up and want to do their sports and go to life that is like, oh crap, like we're deep into this and I don't know how to unwind it at this point, and where have I been?
So, how would you advise a dad who's kind of sitting here in that moment right now? Maybe they've realized it, maybe they haven't. They're super enthralled in their business. And, I told you before we started recording, this is one of the reasons I started this podcast is I saw dads doing that constantly in the military side of the house, especially when Iraq and Afghanistan were up and running hard, just volunteering to go here, volunteering to go there. And before you know it, your family's gone, your wife is gone, your kids are gone, you don't see them anymore, you're angry, you're paying a bunch of extra money out of your already small paycheck in the military to, a family you don't even get to see. Like, how do we catch that before it becomes an issue? What can we say to these dads before it becomes an issue? Like, your business is awesome, but let's pay attention to what's going on at home too.
Yeah, I'm going to make an analogy here, and there's what I end up seeing, because just in the men communities I'm in, I see a lot of this, where I think men feel like when they don't understand how to be present with their kids, it starts because they don't know how to be present with themselves. They don't understand that. And most men were never taught that. Like our parents' generation, and whether they're, Gen X or boomers or whatever they were never taught it. In fact, it's probably why the emotional intelligence level of older generations, especially men in business, is so much lower than it is today, and why it's so important today. So we weren't taught how to be present with ourselves, and if you can't do something for yourself, there's zero chance you can do it for somebody else, right? That's the fallacy around servant leadership, is when it leads to martyrdom because you don't actually have anything to give to people. And so what ends up happening is that these men who don't have the relationship they want with their kids, a lot of them know it, but they don't know what to do, because when they don't see the pathway, they don't know how to go down it. And when they don't have it with themselves, they don't even know where to start. They're just like, I want it, I don't even know how to get there, I'm too far gone, what do? I just keep my head down and keep going. And then what you have is men who, and maybe go through something like me, where like you hit a wall, you hit the eject button, you're fully out, like overnight. And it's almost like somebody getting sober, right? And somebody who gets sober who then goes and finds religion. And what do? They're out there judging everybody, raising the flag, doing all this stuff. And even though the underlying thing is good, like they're doing it in this ugly kind of judgmental way. And what ends up happening is they smother their kids. And they become helicopter parents, and they think you got to be there all the time. Like I was working with a dad who, he had a $3 million contract he was trying to close for his business. And that was like 30% of the revenue for the year. So it was a big deal. And his kids had games all weekend long. He's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, I think I'm just going to go spend the 2 days going to the games, but I'm going to be working the whole time. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't you try this instead? Why don't you go spend 2 hours each day, talk to each kid, make sure you hit all 3 of them, turn your phone off, be all the way present. Let your kids know what you're doing. They will understand it's for your family too. And then go be amazing at work. Don't try to do both at the same time and think because you're there all weekend, your kids give a crap. They don't, right? And your kids, honestly, they don't want to be with you all the time anyways. They want to play. They want to laugh with their friends. They want to go run around. Let them be kids. And when you show up all the way, but do it in small doses. That's what's meaningful.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's beyond important. As I sit here, and I've told you at the beginning of this call, I mean, I homeschool, my kids sit in the office with me, and I'm at a point where, I'm looking forward to my wife retiring later this year, but where she gets to be at home a little bit more. But I tend to be at that, like right on that edge all the time of in business, in dad, in business, in dad. And then I can't be fully present with either one of them because I'm in this mix of both, So, it's wiser. I completely agree with you to spend those solid 2 hours. Like I've got a spot on my calendar with my kids on Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. Just a half an hour that is nothing but theirs for us to just go have playtime in the middle of the day so that they can feel that even when dad's working, I can go spend some time with of them, but they know that when it's time for me to get back in, I get back. Well, okay, let me rephrase this. They mostly know when it's time for me to go back in the office, it's time to go back in the office. But, I think it's much more important to have that pure dedicated time, like put the phone down, step away for a second, spend the time with the kids, and then get back to work. Like your kids need to know what it looks like to earn a paycheck as well, what it looks like to work hard for a company, what it looks like to work hard for what your job is, what your community is, what your whatever is. So I love that. I think that was super wise advice. So as you were traveling around doing all this stuff, like I would usually ask, like, was there any chance to involve your kids in it? But it sounds like you weren't really there very often. So now, when you were growing up, though, you were involved in like your dad's business. How did that start with you kind of working in your dad's business? And, you talked about, shipping things and sweeping up and doing all that. Like how did that kind of start? Was it just like, no, you're coming to work and you're working? Or was it like, hey, Dad, I'm interested in what you do type of thing?
Yeah. I'm going to answer that. And my kids did get to travel occasionally. We took some family trips to Europe. Granted, I worked a lot, so I wasn't around. So, their mom had to cart them around the city, and I was there occasionally, but that did happen every now and then. But again, I didn't understand what presence was at the time, so I got them there. It was one of those whole things like, well, I took you to Europe, and then I didn't actually show up all the way. Yeah. So
no, you put them on a flight to Europe, right? That's you didn't take them to Europe, yeah.
Yeah, it was my dad. It was interesting. He got us in young. He modeled great things. He would get on the forklift and unload a truck that was in the back because it came in, at 5 a.m. when 4 people showed up. He didn't care. In that regard, he modeled so many great things for us and allowed us to figure things out. Like he'd toss us in a warehouse and say, figure out how to ship this stuff, or, go, I don't know, go shadow somebody else. And I really appreciate the way he kind of threw us in the mix and just had us figure things out. That's a skill set that isn't as often taught today. Giving kids the freedom to go do that. And as time went on, I self-selected jobs with some of his either distributors or like third-party companies that worked with him, but they weren't part of it. And I took the worst jobs there because I wanted to know, what was it like working with my dad's company? And then what did the people who did all the lower end jobs, all the really hardworking jobs of those other companies who were using the product, what was it like? What was their experience of it? Like, I wanted to understand all the nuances of it. And then it's funny, my dad and I have talked, he kind of pretends he didn't see this, but like when I was 20 years old is when he ended up selling out. And I was like, Dad, I'm still working summers at these other companies. Like, now you're out, and now he's like, I didn't know you wanted in. I'm like, of course you didn't. So that's where my dad and I had our disconnect is, like he gave to my brother and I, he gave us these opportunities and he didn't see us.
How, when you then grew up and started having kids of your own, do you recall anything in that type of scenario that led you to do something differently, or did you kind of just chase something similar? How did you kind of, at what point did you really start, I guess is a different way of asking this question. What point did you really start to analyze the relationship you had with your dad and what you saw when it came to you and your own kids?
Honestly, it wasn't until I hit 40 till I really saw it. I think I played the victim for a while and felt like if he was going to kind of abandon me like this halfway through, I'm on my own and I'm going to figure this out on my own and I'm going and I don't care who's in my way. And it's probably, why I didn't show up in my marriage the way I could have or early on with my kids, because I was just GSDing, right?
Yeah.
Getting things done.
Yeah.
And I had blinders on too. So I didn't learn that lesson directly from my dad. I had to experience it.
I wish that I could figure out the right formula to apply to men, especially to just say, hey, this is how to kind of work through any sort of pain or anger you're still holding on to with your dad or whatever, like any sort of relationship stuff that we can get through that. Because I was probably in my mid 30s, early 30s when I really started to understand like who my dad was and, you know, what I did get from him before I could really, and he was actually the first person I interviewed on the podcast, because that was right around that time, shortly before that, where I really started to understand who my dad was. And it's like, why did I have to wait until I was in my mid-30s to realize this stuff? How can I get other men to realize it when they're 24, 22, 21, you know, like go punch them in the face, like just go punch them all in the face and say, hey, you're stupid. Go talk to your dad. Like I don't know, you know, what the right answer is at some of that. I wish there was a way to just know how to do that.
I don't think there is a way. What I've found, again, is it goes back to when humans, or we're talking about men here. So when you actually trust and love yourself, when you know yourself, when you know how to be present with yourself, right? You see things differently. You still don't understand them necessarily, right? But you see things differently. And that's what it took for me to be able to say, oh, I don't need my dad to, you know, approve of, like, he hates what I'm doing right now. He thinks I'm stupid. Like, I'm not seeking his validation, because his validation would mean I'd be working in corporate America doing something I hate. I absolutely love what I get to do these days. Working with other men in these communities, sharing these leadership values. And if I was seeking his validation, if I got my self-worth from needing that from him, I think that's where we get stuck in these ruts, these loops, where we don't understand and we have hatred or anger or frustration. And we need forgiveness, and we got to go dig up old trauma. I'm going to say something controversial. Yes, we've all had trauma, right? And I think it's helpful to honor the fact that they have existed in our lives. And I've really learned in my life that every single hard moment, every pain, one, can be shifted by my perspective, and two, can be looked at as, oh, that taught me resilience. Oh, that taught me that I had a expectation. Oh, that taught me that I was looking for my dad to fill a void in my life. He can never fill it. He can't even do it for himself. And I don't need forgiveness anymore, and I don't need to offer it. I actually need to offer appreciation. And it's been a game-changing shift for me, where I don't go dig up old traumas, because I really believe you're going to find what you're looking for. And of course, we can label things as traumas and have them all over our life, and some really are traumas. And like, as we sit here right now, do any of those things, are they helping me breathe or move around or talk to you? Like, no, zero. They do not have to impact it if I don't let them. They're just part of my story. I honor them, I thank them, and I move forward.
No, I completely in alignment on that. Like the trauma side of the house, it's one of those that everybody, to your point, has experienced something in their life. And I think we've created such a, you know, you even said it, the anxious generation in the book, talking about the anxious generation, where now everybody has something in their face that they need therapy for all the time. And so they, like, and I'm not necessarily saying that therapy is bad, so I hope nobody hears that, but everybody doesn't need therapy, right? Like, we all need to understand and appreciate the terrible things that have happened in our life and say, you know what, that's made me who I am today, and that can make me a better person tomorrow if I use it and look at it the right way. Like, I mean, yeah, I can uniquely say this in a different way as a military guy who's been to Iraq and Afghanistan and bounced all over the world and done all sorts of crazy things. It's like you see two different folks that come back from a wartime scenario where one has gone like, wow, I just really sharpened my sword really well. Like, there was some terrible things we went through. We had a rough time, but I built some amazing relationships, some things I learned about myself that I wasn't expecting. And then you have somebody else who says, oh, I'm just like, the world is just falling around me. I'm terrible. I don't know how to handle the things. And all it is really is a different change in perspective on what they experienced and how they let it influence their future. And this is perfect, because I was going to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you before we started calling, but now I get to, you're bringing it up anyway. So
this ended up a story in the book I wrote behind me, Paper Cuts. And
that's more than a paper cut. That would be much larger than a paper cut. So.
It is. So the story goes, this is a deer that my uncle killed. And he had this knife made for me when I was 12. And it had no edge on it. So it's flat, right? It's not sharpened. And what I ended up writing about in the book, and it for me has just been it's been such a cool reminder in life, is, this is really, this blade, this handle, it's unique, right? And this is who we are, right? Each of us has a different, material and length and size and shape, and this edge on here. We all have an edge, right? This one's dull right now. It's still dull. And our experiences and our choices, they sharpen this edge, right? But who says this edge needs to be sharp all the way through? Like, what if I want to put a serrated part right here? Or what if I want to put a notch on there's so many ways to sharpen your edges. And if you don't like it, go grind it down and put a different edge on it. You control your edge. You are in charge of how you sharpen it, in what ways. So my question is what edge serves you the most? And if it's not serving you, grind it down. Start over. You don't have to change the knife. This is you.
I think that to continue that analogy is to grind down that edge does take some work, and it does take getting rid of part of who you are. Because it just like it takes getting rid of some of that metal on that knife, right? The only way to fix that is to get rid of some of the metal on the knife. The only way to fix it in yourself is to get rid of some of the stuff. And that doesn't mean more talk therapy. That means more being honest with who you are, more honest with what the experience was, more honest with what it did for you, more honest with how you're overreacting or underreacting or whatever. But it's your choice. In the grand scheme of things, we all have the choice on how we want to walk through this life. We all have the choice on, and I try to tell that to my kids. Like, when I say, I've tried to change my language in how I say, hey, if I have to tell you to do this one more time, I am going to choose to raise my voice, and it's not going to be you don't make me do it. It's my own choice. I get to look at all of this in my own way. You're not making me angry. I'm choosing to be angry. You're not making me raise my voice. I'm choosing to raise my voice. Like, everything in our life is our choice to be able to do with or not do with what we like. So grind down that knife if you're finding a spot that you don't like on the blade. So I love it. Yeah. It doesn't change the handle. It doesn't change how you're holding on to it. It doesn't change its utility. I mean, it will eventually change the utility of the knife. And it'll hopefully make it for the better if you're doing the right actions, right? Your utility will go through the roof at that point. But no, I love the knife analogy. Appreciate that. So as you were raising the kids, and you're working with your wife, or perhaps you would say, I don't know, I'm just making this up. Your wife was raising the kids, and you were kind of augmenting. How would you kind of say, hey, this is how we chose to raise the kids? Like, what sort of conversations did you have about raising kids with your wife, or was it just kind of going through the motions of whatever's there?
Yeah, if I'm being fully honest, I don't remember a lot of them, and I don't know whether I wasn't present. I don't know whether I blocked them out. I don't know whether I numbed myself to a lot of this stuff. I don't remember a lot of them. I know that one of the areas where my ex-wife was a D1 basketball player, and for her, when you committed to something, you did not go back on that commitment. And I a little more loosey-goosey on that, I think that this today, what I find with people, and I know I'm going off topic a little bit, but I find that as we think we all love to some degree serving other people, right? And we kind of hide under this servant leadership or giving. And the problem is that a lot of times we end up sacrificing our who we are or what we want to do, or maybe something healthy for us. But sacrifice doesn't have to equal self-neglect. And this is something that I really, there's a line here, there's an edge here. And I play with it, which is, just because I made a commitment doesn't mean I have to go so far as to actually hurt myself to fulfill it. Like, it's my stinking life. Mine. And if I'm not taking care of me and my best interest and what serves me the most, right? And there are times I have to go do things I don't love doing. But if it's at a point where it's actually hurting me, like mentally or physically, you are not obligated, in my opinion, to follow it through to the nth degree, to the end of the earth, until you collapse and fall apart, a bag of bones, right? And I get the other side of it. And that's an interesting thing. Like, I think co-parenting, you dance with these different topics because everybody grew up differently. And that was one my ex-wife and I to this day still dance with on different sides of the coin, which is like, how do you show up in a way that commitment, like making agreements and following through are so important, and we can't predict life. We can't see shifts that happen along the way. How do we do this in a way that stays healthy, keeps lines of communication open, allows for you to tack with the wind? Because how many things in life do you get into and you're like, oh my God, I had no idea I was signing up for that, or whoa, that came out of left field. And then we just deal with it. We just deal with it.
Yeah. And I think that's for me, that goes back to, I'll use the family, for instance. Businesses, they have core values. Our family has core values. And it's one of those that we make our decisions based on the core values is in alignment with our core values, because life is going to come at you. Things are going to change. Life is going to happen. You're going to fall. You're going to have some edges you need to shave off, to go back to the previous analogy. There are things that are going to happen. If something is not serving you or your core values or your mission anymore, then it's time to let that go. Like, it's okay, even if that was your commitment. And I've tried to tell that to the kids. Like, there's a difference between being committed to the fact that you said you were going to play on this golf team, and saying, hey, now all of a sudden this is becoming a detriment to your mental health because you're taking it so far that it's trouble. Like, okay, we have to know that there's a line there. Like, you can't be so committed to the team that now all of a sudden you can't sleep at night because you're so anxious about the fact that you didn't get the birdie on the last hole. And it's like, man, oh man, we got to work through some of this stuff. So because to me, like, commitment is a thing, right? I completely am a man of my word, and when I'm not, I feel horrible about it. But there have been many times in my life I've gone to that point where it's well beyond. I'm doing it to a detriment of myself by far, and like it's not the easiest to let that side of me go either, because I still want to do that sometimes today, but I definitely don't want to teach my kids to do that. So it's a hard balance.
This is where really playing around with modeling to our kids becomes so important, I believe, because in a lot of the situations that maybe you're thinking about where you've given your word and you're a man of your word, when we start to dissect those, why did you give your word to that, right? A lot of times, like, oh, if I was really being honest with myself and integrous, I wouldn't have given my word on that because it actually didn't serve me in the first place. I felt like I needed to do something for, so we start to unwind. I play with unwinding these things in my life. Like, when I've done that, it's like, if I was going back in time, I felt obligated, or felt like there was some social external pressure to respond in a certain way, or I'm just a man, or I'm running this business and I'm going to do this and here's my word. That didn't serve me, which means it didn't serve my family. Crap.
I think it goes, and I could be misremembering it, but I think it's No More Mr. Nice Guy that talks about stuff like that, right? Where it's like, no, like by bending yourself to the basically to the will of other people, you are being so dishonest with yourself. You're not going to give yourself the way it needs to be given anyways, like one way or another. It's better to just not make that commitment so that you can stay true to who you are and be better off. Everybody's going to be better off in the long run. They'll find somebody who's more committed to it than you were to begin with. Like you could be robbing that person of finding the right thing to do because you made a commitment and then you said, I'm going to stick to it no matter what. And now you've robbed that person of being able to find the person that could actually support and serve. Oh, I've got a 2-year-old. Come here, little lady. She wants to come and say hi, apparently. She just let the dog in, just came busting into the door.
Yeah, that book has been really powerful in my life and a lot of other men's lives. Hey, sweetie.
Say hi. You say hi? Can you wave and say hi? No? You don't want to do that?
Dr. Robert Glover, who wrote that, one of my favorite things he talks about is covert contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just with other people. A lot of times they're with ourselves, right? And that's why we end up committing to things, agreeing to things, saying things, getting into certain actions. It's where these codependencies that we just can't see lie, right? It's where the ugly side of being a giver lies, because so often when we give things, it's so rare that there's nothing attached to it. No expectations, no quid pro quo. Even with my kids, I'm like, well, I gave you your allowance, your whatever, right? We expect something. Like there's always something, a smile, something. Like giving means like, here you go, and you walk away.
There's open-handed giving and closed-handed giving, or is it face up hand giving and closed giving? Like giving is literally hand is down. Like I'm not looking for anything else. Open hand, okay, you got to come get it, and I want certain things, where no, I'm just, here it is, I'm giving it to you. Like there's nothing on the other side of it. I don't need anything to want anything, just here. And that's harder to deal with our kids sometimes, because we're always expecting something of our kids. We're always wanting something here. We're always trying to lean here or lean there or push this or push that, or get some outcome out of our kids that we're wanting, or business, right? And we do the same thing in our business with folks, so it's such a difficult part of life, in being honest with ourselves and being honest with the actions that we're doing and taking. So,
just tying this back to the agreements and expectations conversation, and just to give credit where credit's due, there's a lady named Christine Hassler who wrote a book called Expectations Hangover, maybe 10 years ago. And that's where a lot of my understanding around this, or at least the phraseology around it, comes from. But it's such a different conversation when, with your kids at work, when you say, hey, normally I'd have an expectation around this. Let's talk about it. These are my feelings. Clearly I can't make you do this stuff. You're going to do what you want to do. But let's talk about this, because I want us to have an agreement here. This is really important to me. Let's hear your side of it. And even if you ultimately, as the parent, sometimes we have to say, okay, I hear you, and these things have to go, in place here. When you make an agreement, and you can come to a point at the end of it where like, do we have an agreement? Do you feel comfortable honoring this? Yes. When it gets broken, it's no longer like we take it personally when our expectations don't get met, right? That's when we get triggered, we get angry, we flash, and like, what? And when an agreement bursts broken, it's like, oh, that's really weird. We had an agreement. Can you help me understand why you didn't follow through on the agreement? Like it's almost like detached, this third party thing that sits over here. And let's talk about that. Not like, my expectations are mine. I own them. The agreement was ours. So it's this thing over here. So it changes the energy we approach the conversation with, which is really cool.
I really like that. And it gives them, especially if we talk about it as the kids side of the house, it gives them the ownership to be able to say, no, like this, like I actually said that. Those were my words. I did agree to this, instead of just, well, you're the one who told me I had to do it anyways. And it's like, well, no, like that's not how it went down, which is how oftentimes it goes down, especially as a prior military dad. It's oftentimes for me, it's like, no, this is what I expect. This is what you're going to do. And it's like, no, that's not exactly a healthy way to be able to manage this situation right now.
Well, I have this conversation with other business owners, and they're like, well, wait a minute, I'm hiring for this position. That's the job description. Of course I have expectations. I'm paying the bills. It's like, yes, okay. But how do we shift this into an agreement where it's like, hey, we need to fill a role. We don't have all the answers, but it feels like we need a marketing director. And that marketing director in our sort of organization, we feel like, it seems like, to be successful, it looks like this. You've had success here. Let's make an agreement. Like, certain activities have to get done, but how they get done, in what order, at what time, like, I guess we don't really care, because we're looking for results. Like, we're hiring the marketing director because we want something X to happen in our organization, right? So let's agree that the basis of our conversation is this job description, but we're talking about results. How would you get to the results that we need? Let's have that agreement. I'm not going to agree to everything you say, but I want your ideas. And then let's come to a common ground and lock in an agreement. Because honestly, like, job descriptions are BS, right? And to hold to them like we're some masters who are offering this dollar amount every month because now I own you, like, it's ridiculous. Let's shift that to just the start of a conversation to make an agreement. And it's so, God, you get people to buy in. You get your employees to go, well, I'm the one who shifted. Like I had power. They let me change how I showed up. It's empowering. It feels amazing to actually want to do your job.
Yeah. So let's say, participation in the household and taking care of the household type of stuff, right? We'll keep it semi-basic, right? Because you mentioned an allowance before. Some people use an allowance when the kids do chores and whatnot. Maybe that's the expectation. Maybe it's agreement. I don't know. But like, how do we sit down as a family and create the agreement to say, hey, this is how we're going to do things in the house, and everybody has agreed upon it?
There's a lot of ways to do this, and there's people that really, like, this is kind of their passion and focus that I'm going to butcher a little bit about what they say, but I'm just going to share my own iteration, my own synthesis of it for me. And what I've done is say, hey, we're all here. This is kind of what's happening right now. We're having breakfast every morning because you're in school. We're making lunches. We don't have a housekeeper, so we're cleaning the toilets once a week. We have laundry to do, and kind of list it all out and say, what do you feel, just before I tell you anything, what do you feel is fair that your involvement is? Oh, during basketball season it shifts. Cool. How does it shift for you? And just start this conversation where you don't project onto it what you feel like. Because my mom had a Rolodex of 350 3x5 cards that all had a different chore on it. Some were weekly chore cards, some were daily chore cards. Oh my goodness. Like, I promise to never do that to my kids. And so I probably swung the pendulum too far the other direction, but the hard part is I know I felt like, well, I'm the dad. I don't have to listen to my kids tell me what they think. Like, I'm just going to do what I want. You got to get people to buy in. Like, relationships are relationships, and humans are still humans, whether they're at work or at home or your kids or your friends. How do you get people to buy in and want to participate, want to be there? It's like, well, we're here in the house. Let's make these agreements, but what feels good for you? Does it feel like it's too much to empty the dishwasher? Well, tell me what that feels like. Why? Oh, you hate that. Cool. Is there a substitute? Like, what else might feel good? And then how do we do this when you have to every now and then? What can that look like? How can I ask you in a way that wouldn't trigger you? Because there's times I'm going to need you to do it. So how do you want me to ask? Awesome. Cool. Can we agree on that? Yeah, let's write it down. It's just this, it's treating every other human, even a 3-year-old, like they're a sovereign being, because they are, right? One of my favorite poems is by Khalil Gibran, and it's called On Children. And without telling you the whole thing, it basically says, you've got God, who's the archer, and we're the bow. And it's our job to keep ourselves strengthened and to keep ourselves finished, so we're bendable without being breakable. So we can, the archer, God, can pull us back far and really get the most out of that tension, that lever action that the bow provides. And our kids are the arrow. Like, we're holding on to them for a minute, but God's about to let them fly, and we have no control over any of it except for pointing them in the right direction. Because when we treat our kids like they're sovereign beings, and we have guardrails and we have a sandbox for them to play in that changes in size as they grow older, it teaches them to actually love and trust themselves, to look inside instead of to their parents like, whoa, I can't answer that. I got to ask my dad. No. What do you think? What does your gut say? I trust you. Cool. Okay. That feels a little off. Let's have a conversation. Like, treating everybody like a sovereign, normal, like, self-functioning human being changes everything.
And I love that. I'm going to have to look at that poem because it also has a little bit of a play in with the Bible verses is blessed are the man whose quiver is full, right? Like, having loads of kids and being able to do everything you can to point them in the right direction. God eventually is going to do, or they're eventually going to have their own choices. They're going to do their own things. And, really from the day one, they have their own choices. You just, it's just how can I be the best bow that I can to make sure that I'm guiding them in the right direction the best way that I can. So, what parts of that, to go back to the agreement thing, like what parts of that in our life is it less about an agreement and more, especially as parents, Like, no, this is just what you're doing, because this is like not the whole, well, you live in my house, so you're going to do it type of thing. But like, there are some things where you can have all the say and thought process you want, but this is what you are doing, right? Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
I would never have said this until 2 years ago, but the answer is you just don't, in my opinion. And my whole life I've thought that, well, that's BS. Of course you do. You're the parent, and you get the final say. And if you really want to model stuff for your kids, I'm finding in my own highly unsuccessful at times pathway and skinning my knees all the time, that handling things in the moment, needing my ego to be appeased, that, you better give me respect in the moment, and I'm your dad. When I let all that go, because I don't need it. Again, I don't need a validation from my dad, and I don't need it from my kids, right? I know who I am. I trust me. And my kids don't have the skill sets to manage their emotions. They're kids. And when we come back a day later and say, hey, this happened, we need to talk about it now. It can't keep happening. There are consequences. Could be natural, could be something else. We need to reset agreements around this. And, like I said, there are consequences. I don't know what they are for that situation. You don't let it fully go, but kids can't handle things in the moment anyways. And neither can we. Otherwise, that's why we end up spanking and yelling and getting angry, because we can't manage our emotions. If we can't, how can a kid?
To be contrarian and push back a little bit, because that's what I like to do. I think there are obviously, and this is going to be similar to the bank analogy, the robbing the bank analogy, right? So a little overboard here. But I think there's obviously some times where I'm going to say, no, you are not running in traffic when there's cars driving up and down the road. It's not happening, right? So I always try to find the line of where I sit down and say, hey, here are our lines to say, no, you're not running in traffic, period, dot, end of story. It is not happening. I don't care what you think. I don't care how we're going to work this. There's no agreement that we're going to get to that allows you to go run in traffic. It's just not going to happen. Versus, no, I'm totally fine with you figuring out how to go build that treehouse in the backyard all by yourself, even though you're 6. Like, I mean, I totally would be down with my kid trying to go do that. Like, that sounds like go have the adventure. Yes, you may smash your thumb with a hammer. That's part of life. We're going to figure that out. No big deal. But there's lines that I try to figure out on where I let the freedom happen and where I don't. And it's such a difficult dance to play when it comes to the fatherhood side of the house.
When it's a health and safety issue, of course, it's our job as parents to protect our kids. And at the same time, we have to let go of them intellectually understanding why we're doing it. If your kid's running away from you and they're 6 years old, and you literally hug them and grab them and they can freak out, and that's fine. And at the same time, detach from needing them to calm down or understand what you're doing. Like, they're not going to, and that's okay. But my job is to protect you, and I'm just creating this bear hug of love around you.
Or screaming this loud voice of anger at you. It's not actually anger; it's emotion. But yeah, like those are moments. Yeah,
it's when we get angry in those moments that then we end up twisting their arm or spanking them or yelling at them or turning it into something it doesn't need to be, because they're learning to manage their emotions. Me as a 46-year-old today, I'm pretty good, but I still lose myself every now and then. And I've been doing this for 46 years.
Yep, that's what my sons have heard me multiple times, and I'll say it to remind myself more than anything else. It's like, what are you, like 6 years old or something? Like, it's a reminder to my brain of, you're dealing with a 6-year-old. Like, I barely have some of this stuff under control. There's no way I should expect my kids to have this stuff under control. And if I don't have it under control, no wonder they're modeling that, like, come on, like, here we go. How do I model this well? But yet there's moments where, like the other day, my kids were over at my parents' house. My dad, we try not to have too much junk food at all in the house. I just don't want to have it in the house. If for no other reason than I'll eat all of it. And that's bad for me and the scale that I stand on in the morning, right? But when they go to grandma and grandpa's house or Mima and Peepaw's house, like there's stuff there, right? So my son my dad went over and tried to give my son something. He's like, no, thank you. That's all right. And he's like, no, it's just one. He's like, well, I don't think my dad would really appreciate it. And I want to respect his wishes. And he chose not to have it. And my dad came back and was like, what 10-year-old says that when they have like this stuff in front of us? Like, I don't know, but clearly something was going right, or he was, scared to death I was going to beat him when we get home, one or the other. But obviously that's not going to be the thing that happens. Yeah, at least I'm saying that on the recording. But it was like, man, oh man, at least I can feel something is at least on the right track. We're doing some stuff that's right here. And we're doing things right in this house that, he's making decisions on his own based off of the things that we've talked about. And he'll even, at times now in the grocery store, look at the back of the things because I'm trying to get rid of all the garbage that is coming into our house. Like if we just have such garbage food and all these different things, and it's like that is something I can represent to them to show like, hey, this is what we could do in our own bodies, like what we could do in our house that controls who we are as a human being and how we're going to be showing up in the world. And it was fun to hear that story from my dad that happened. So it was awesome.
I love that. And it goes the other direction sometimes. Like it was last year when my daughter was 16 and she's playing varsity basketball, and after she got her car and she get that freedom, her and her friends are going out to Taco Bell or Panera or whatever else every stinking day, burning through their allowance or their savings, whatever. I'm not paying for it, but they're still going. And I didn't stop it. I don't model it. I don't eat that way myself. I always had meals ready. And what happened was it took about 3 months, and not only did she see her performance in her game go down, excuse me, but she found that her stomach was finally getting upset, and it was impacting her in other ways. And until she experienced it, like I didn't sit there and shame her for it. I just said, "Hey, that probably doesn't make you feel good, does it?" No, keeps going and eating it. But these are the little things where it's like I could have been commanding that she not do that. And that's so stupid. And you're an athlete. Why are you doing this? This is hurting your game. And it's like, it is. And, if that's your choice, we'll see what happens. Maybe it'll affect you not the same way. Let's see. And I just left it open-ended like that, which I never would have done before. But this is part of what, I've been practicing doing. And it's way more powerful when they figure it out on their own because then they don't go back to it.
Yeah, the experiencing it on their own, I think, is a massively important thing. It's that, especially in the entrepreneur world, where if somebody came from nothing and then turned into building a business and doing all these things, they're like, how do I ensure that it's the garbage that I went through that got me to the point where I was able to do this? How do I make sure that my kids who don't have to deal with any of that garbage can still get to where they're going? It's like, oh, well, let's still let them make their own choices, and guide them and teach them they're going to have struggles. How do they deal with it? Don't take away any of the struggles. Let them have the struggles. And they see me struggle with food because that's one of my biggest things that I struggle with in my life is food. You talk about Taco Bell, and I almost started scratching and itching, and I wanted to go get myself, some Taco Bell. But they see me do it all the time. They see me struggle. I talk about it. They know what it's like, and I think that's one of the things that has influenced my son the most. Is I talk about it and say, hey, this is one of the things Daddy really struggles with. Like I love carbohydrates and I love garbage food. I used to live right around the corner. Thankfully, I was, 23 years old or something like that, and riding a motorcycle and deploying all the time and a young kid. So I had really high testosterone, a really high metabolism, but I lived right next door to a Taco Bell, and I would eat Taco Bell all the time. I work swing shift, so it's open in the afternoon. I'd drive to Taco Bell, grab my Taco Bell, drive to work, and I'm scarfing down all that. It was just horrendous. But man, oh man, does it make a difference in your life when you can teach your kids to just make those decisions by themselves? And even at 10 years old, what do you know? That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So now your kids, obviously you've got one in, D1 sports, another one well on the way by the sounds of things to, speaking of, is there there any college that your 17-year-old is looking at already or eyeing? How's that looking for the future side?
There's a couple. Most of them,
Yeah.
I'm in Phoenix. Most of those are on the East Coast. So we'll see how that all plays out.
Yeah, very good. Awesome. So now that they're, out and about, like how has your relationship with them changed, and how have you kind of altered your communication? Obviously, you've talked a lot about how it's changed over the last couple of years with your own personal self-work, but how has it changed in helping them develop what it means to be an adult in this world right now?
Yeah, I'll talk about my older daughter first. Her and I really struggled through the divorce. We were really close beforehand, and I didn't handle the divorce well. I mean, there's no rule books here, right? So. I know she felt hurt, she felt abandoned, and rightfully so in many ways. And so we've spent the last few years rebuilding, and part of that rebuilding is me backing way off, and letting her flourish and thrive and experience college life, and being a young woman and making decisions and practicing this. Being detached from her failures or sidesteps or things that I just wouldn't choose, right? Or it wouldn't be my decision. And it's tied back to this sovereignty, topic that we talked about a minute ago. And I'm just finding that the more curious I get with my kids, the more I don't immediately come say, oh, you shared that? Well, I would have done this, or projected immediately, or stated a position, or judged, what happened, or somehow I'm like, oh, you did what? Just these like little tiny ways that we sometimes, not intentionally gaslight, our kids. I hate that word, but I mean that's kind of what's happening. I'm just projecting my own fears onto them, right? And when I step out of that, it allows them to, they're sharing more vulnerably with me than they ever have before. They're asking and giving me details about life that I'm like, I don't know if I want to know that. It's pretty cool you're sharing that with me. But it's because I'm not shutting them down or going, what? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm not bothered, when clearly I am, right? That's how I would have handled stuff in the past, but really getting myself to a place where I don't listen that way. I don't respond that way, because whatever they're experiencing or going through, what's the worst thing that can happen to, a girl dad? They get pregnant, outside of them, dying, maybe. I don't know what it's different for everybody, but all these things are teachers. Like my partner, she actually got pregnant in high school, and she ended up giving it away to foster parents, but had an open relationship with them. And that girl just got married, and she was at her wedding, her daughter. But yeah, she's got 9-year-old kids too. And it was this beautiful thing to say, it can be really healthy. We can have appreciation for all this stuff. And had her parents shamed her and shunned her, and it would have destroyed everything. She wouldn't be the same person, but they embraced her. They loved her. And that's what I'm seeing, really has the most benefit in my relationship with my daughters. And even the 9-year-olds. Gosh, it's been fun cycling back through that younger age group, but it works the same. It's allowing them to have their experience and then letting their brain interpret it however their little brains interpret it, and going, oh, tell me more. Why do you feel that way? How do you think other people felt? Just asking curious questions, which means we're fully present, right? And that's the key. Because when we're not fully present, it's impossible to be that curious.
For sure, yeah, because you've got your own agenda that you're already pushing. So curiosity goes out the window when you have your own agenda. So now you're obviously, the business you have is helping other dads through a lot of this stuff. You've done a lot of your own personal work on yourself, trying to figure all this out, and you've had your own experiences going through. So, talk to me a little bit about your business and doing this with other dads, and how you're kind of working through this with other dads struggling or not.
Yeah. So I chased a lot of things as I got out. I swung the pendulum from being in business to completely out of it. I found myself at the end of last year teaching authenticity and not being authentic myself. And what I mean by that is, while I was authentic and integrous in so many ways, I took my 20-year business experience and just pretended like I didn't have it. And so that's what's really shifted for me in the work I do today is I've really blended the two together. And it's like, there's so much value. Like I've learned so much running 7 and 8 figure companies, going through the IPO process, raising millions of dollars, doing an S1, hiring a full board, to go do that. And then it falls apart. Like, that's not embarrassing. I'm so grateful for it. Like, what a cool experience to go through that 1.5-year process. Why am I not bringing that to other men going through the same thing who also are fathers and have kids? Like, it was not fully authentic to not bring all of that to the table because there's so much value there. So how do I help men? My business is called 3xbold.com. And I really, through in a couple different ways, I teach men how to be fathers, lovers, and leaders, and so many men are good at business, and it's so hard to show up, over time and really be in love with your partner and to also be a fully present father and to do all three of them in a way that's healthy, that you're not burned out, that you don't feel like you're just hustling everything, which is the second part of where I end up helping people is either personally, and I really help what I call men recalibrate. Just like the knife. You're not bad. You don't need to reinvent yourself. We just need to grind down your edge and resharpen it the way you want today, right? That's the recalibration process. And the second piece is really kind of team synchronization. It's going into organizations that are my sweet spot, like $3 to $50 million. And working with not only their leadership, like these men who lead these companies. I know there's women, but men, I specialize in fathers who do this, but all their team members. How do you get them to show up and do leadership development that isn't just business and tactics focus and isn't just life coachy? How do you blend the two? How do you find this middle ground that allows you to show up at home, at work, in a way that's like, you love life. You're passionate again. It's healthy.
I love that. Yeah, it's, and something you said at the beginning of that when you were putting the preface on there was, when I left the military, and I even had a similar conversation yesterday. I was talking to somebody about my dad coaching, and it was like, he was like, "Oh, you should go talk to the military guys too about, you talked about how that was," and I focus mostly on entrepreneurs, given what I do now. But I had told him on the phone just yesterday, I was like, no, once I took that uniform off, I kind of just walked away as far as I could. And I let that pendulum swing so much that now I like, to your point, as you were saying that, it was like a smack in my face. Like, how much of those previous skills, in my education company that I'm on the board of, like we talk about it all the time, the skills that the military has taught you and how you can use that in real estate, how you can use that to grow your future. But here I am on my side, almost being a hypocrite of saying, no, like I'm going to ignore the rest of that past part of my life and just focus on this stuff. And it's like, man, oh man, like again, all of our previous experiences have got us to where we are now. If you're not happy with where you are now, then you can change today for a better tomorrow, but you can't change yesterday for a better today. Like that is where you are right now. And it's because of all of that. So use all of that for the tools that they're there for, like even if it's painful, pull it out. It's a good tool. Like it can be used for good for somebody else. You went through pain that somebody else may be going through. How selfish of you to keep it to yourself and not let them learn from your experience getting through it. So I really, I appreciate you stepping on my toes. You didn't intend to, but I appreciate you stepping on my toes on that. So that's wonderful.
By the way, that's a perfect example of where I didn't actually tell you anything. I just shared my experience, and it gave you permission to actually look at what happened in your life, and you're like, oh shit, yep, there it is.
Yeah. And I appreciate it. And that's where, again, if I don't use that in my past to help somebody else, then what the heck's the point of the past? Right. So come on, let's use it for good. So, Brent, I really appreciate you jumping on. I've had an absolute pleasure. Is there anything that you wanted to discuss that we didn't get to, or that you wish we would have talked about?
Yeah, there's one thing, and for all the men out there that are listening to this podcast, that maybe you love what we're saying, maybe you've never heard this before, maybe you're just in a deep, dark moment, maybe you're thriving. My encouragement is find community of other men. The thing that men don't do well or often enough is give voice to what's inside of us. We bottle it up. We think we have to be strong and tough. And it's a verse from the Gospel of Thomas that says, what you keep inside of you will ultimately kill you, and what you let out will help you flourish, will help you thrive. And it's these things that our wives, our girlfriends, that the women in our lives are so good at picking up the phone. And sometimes it sounds like gossip, but other times it's just them sharing life, sharing their frustrations, letting their emotions bubble up and just popping them constantly before they build. Not us men, we're stoic. We are so strong, but the problem is that things that are too brittle, they break. And don't let yourself get too brittle. Find an outlet, find a community, find a group of men that hold you accountable to the place where they're like, hey, if this is something you would tell a stranger over a beer, I don't want to hear it. I want to know the next layer down, or even the next layer below that. Where can you find an outlet for that in your life? Because that is what will honor you, which when you do that, honors everybody else in your life.
For sure. I love that. I appreciate you you adding that. It's one of those that we are very, to your point, it's like ingrained in us to want to hold everything in and just be the apex, the one that's holding it all together, the one that can do all of that. But in the grand scheme of things, man, like we could take the apex out by just like wearing ourselves out and being down in the bottom of the barrel. So definitely find those right 5 people around you, the best 5 people you can that are going to help sharpen you and build you into the right person that you're supposed to be, and that you can be vulnerable and honest and open with. So I greatly appreciate that addition. So thank you again, Brent, for jumping on. I have greatly appreciated it. If folks wanted to reach out to you, find out more about what you're doing to serve men and how you're growing that, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you and find out what you're doing?
Yeah, really just go to the number 3, the letter X, bold.com.
Awesome. All right, 3xbold.com. That'll be in the show notes. Thank you again, Brent, for jumping on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And please, folks, reach out to Brent if there's anything he can do to serve you, which it sounds like there is definitely some things that you're more than capable of helping some men out with. So thank you, everybody, for listening. We appreciate it, and we will see everybody on the next show.
Thank you so much for listening to the BizDad Podcast. We hope you found some value in your time here with us, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share so you and your friends won't miss our upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Rumble, where we continue these discussions and share more valuable content. Be the dad you know you need to be and run your business in a way you're proud to share with your kids. Keep crushing it.